Hi there, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening. My name is Sarah Huffman, and I am the Art Rental and Sales Associate here at the Art Gallery of Alberta. We welcome you to our Meet the Artisan series, a part of AGA Live, which is newly presented by EPCOR's Heart and Soul Fund. Here at the gallery, we embrace the teachings of Tatewa, a Cree phrase meaning welcome, there is room. In our house, even the virtual one, everyone is welcome. I'm delighted to be your host for this hour. Joining me today is Alaynee Goodwill-Littlechild. Before we dive into the subject, I'd like to highlight that this is an interactive event and we'd like to hear from you. You are welcome to use the chat window on the side screen to share your comments as we discuss with Alaynee. If a question gets unnoticed or unanswered at the time, please know that we will review all unanswered questions before we wrap up today's event. So Alaynee has a wonderful bio that she's prepared for us, and I'm just going to read that before we introduce her. So Alaynee Goodwill-Littlechild is a Dakota Lakota Sioux woman raised in the Treaty 6 community of Muskwassee, Alberta. As a girl, Alaynee developed a strong bond and natural talent to the many forms of traditional art within her Dakota Lakota culture. It is important for her to be respectful and keep the integrity of traditional knowledge by sharing cultural significance, traditional techniques, and advocating on the importance of cultural identity and education. Alaynee's quill work, traditional dolls, beadwork, and parafleche paintings are among the most popular pieces that remain in private collections worldwide. She was the only Alberta artist to be selected for the Coca-Cola Aboriginal Art Bottle exhibit and auction for the 2010 Olympic Winter Games in Vancouver. She was also featured in the exhibition The Art of Craft, Cultural Olympiade at the Museum of Vancouver. Alaynee has been a contributor to the Be Yellowtail Collective since 2016. Bethany Yellowtail is a prominent fashion designer, and the collective supports and showcases Indigenous designers and artists to a broader fashion audience. The collective supports each other in sharing and owning their narrative, as well as supporting social justice issues and making change. Alaynee's pieces have been worn at events such as the 90th Annual Academy Awards by youth activist Shauna Long. Her pieces were also featured in Nike's N7 Dare to Rise commercial featuring youth ambassador Jude Schimmel, and in Spike Lee's Be Truly Free. Alaynee also collaborates with other designers, both local and international. In addition to being an artist, she's a wonderful mother, registered social worker, advocate, business owner, and art instructor. Please take this time with me to give a warm welcome to our November artisan, Alaynee Goodwill-Littlechild.
Hi.
Hello.
How are you?
Good, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm good. Keeping warm.
Yeah, on this chilly day.
Yep.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us this evening, Alaynee. I loved reading your bio and starting to learn a little bit more about your craft. And I'm really excited to ask you some questions and get to know more about you.
Well, that makes me, thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. Are the earrings you're wearing, are those a part of your collection?
Yeah, so I'm trying to find time to do a few restocks and then just make some pieces available for Christmas or, whatever. So I do have these sets. So they're on my Instagram. And then I have a couple restocks on Be Yellowtail website. So you could just find that on my Instagram, or you can just go straight to the website. So yeah, there's a lot of beautiful pieces out.
Yay, that's so exciting. Well, with the holidays, it's always so nice to support local artisans, and I'm super excited to showcase some of the pieces that we have on the presentation this evening. So I'm just going to pop over to the next slide. And let's talk about these pieces.
Yeah, so I feel so blessed to have been able to create pieces with amazing and beautiful materials. So you'll see a small set of Dentalium fan style earrings. And what's special about those is they're antique. So they were from, the Northwest coast, and they were collected in the 1970s. So that in itself is beautiful. But to be able to work with that heritage material and to kind of bring a new spin with the 24 karat beads is what I really like to do. So I like to pair our traditional work with some modern flair to it. So yeah.
Absolutely. Wonderful. And how did you acquire those pieces?
Well, it's tricky. So you have to, even for some of the trade beads, so the materials that a lot of artists like myself do is we try to get antique pieces. So we would like the 24 karat gold beads. So there's a small group that we kind of help each other out. And so for this particular set, I had to trade some quillwork or identity. So I'm excited to see, what's going to happen in 2021.
Yeah, absolutely. And the pieces on the top left corner, can you explain those pieces for us?
Yeah. So I have never owned we don't have trees. We don't have a lot of trees. So we have to utilize something else to tan our hides. So I've never actually had a fully smoked hide because they're very, very expensive and they're very labor intensive. And they're very precious to us. So I think somebody was raffling it and I bought a ticket and I won. And it was so amazing. Yeah, it was so, I was crying because it's such a beautiful, and I never win anything. And so I have that and I never use it. So, and then I was like, you know what? I need to share it because if I just keep it and I'm scared to use any of it, like what's the point of me having it? So I decided to make some lanyards. So what I love about smoked tan hide is we have, the smoked smell is what brings so much comfort to me as to a lot of people. And so in that way, whenever I smell smoked hide, I always feel comforted and I always feel good. So I didn't want to use all of the smoked hide and, do anything on top of it that would take away from that natural smell. So I made sure to just kind of do a few embellishments, but then have the hide, be the main focus.
Yeah, so, really highlight the resource. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And how did you find working with it as compared to working with the other materials that you work with?
Well, smoked hide, just because it's so special, but it's also really easy to work with. So because it's been processed in this slow, tradition that have been passed down from generations, it has this subtleness of, it still has, it's a strong hide, but the needle that we pass through it just slides through. So it's not really hard on your hands. And so for me, working with it was pretty good. Like, I mean, I love working with that, but of course, like, I also wanted them to be washable because sometimes, we wear makeup or we have our masks or whatever. So I made the opposite side something that you can wash so you can kind of quickly, wipe it down. And then something really accessible for everybody. So that was the focus of those pieces. And I just wanted to see how they would turn out. I usually have 3 or 4 projects that I started and I'm like, you know what? I don't know. I'll come back to it. And so those actually were the quilt pieces on there. They were from a year prior. I made them and I had no idea why I made them. I wanted to see how they turned out. And then it just came like this past summer, like, let's see if I could go back and see if I could bring something different to it. So I was really happy how they turned out. I love working with it. And so the circles are rawhide, which is another material that we use. So it's hard and it's very durable. So I did a couple of series, some AGA lives with Liz. We did paraflash boxes. So that was the type of material that we used.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that's when we were talking about that. So I wanted to kind of bring that in as well. Yeah.
Cool. And with the bracelets, what is the base of those?
So they're actual bracelet blanks. So they're brass blanks, which I have to order. So it's kind of hard that we're up here in Canada to get a lot of the supplies that I need because there's just not a lot of option here. There are some, but I usually import all of my materials that I use, with the exception of some beads and then needles and thread. And I try to do that locally. And so that's really important as well. But for the bracelets, what I did was we used, what did I use? Oh no, I think I used commercial hide, the base. And then on the back, I used like leather. And that's pretty tough to work with. But I love the way it always turns out. And I always try to make it so that you could wear it, but it's not, if you drop it, it's fine. Right. So when my children were younger, when they were much, much younger, they would play with some of, and I'd be like, okay, that's good. Because if you're little and you're a child and you're dropping things and you're pulling and whatever, I wanted to make it durable. So I thank my kids for that. But they're all grown up now. They're in their 20s and teens.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, especially with the earrings too, right? Like you don't want something that's like ridiculously heavy that, is uncomfortable to wear after a while. Yeah.
Well, I used to be like that. Like I had to really, usually when I make something, if you see me in the gallery or at work, I don't wear any jewelry. And so when I do, it's usually big. It's some statement pieces. Yeah. So I had to learn that not everybody wants huge earrings. So the pair of earrings that are featured there, those were made for my mom.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I made them for her for Mother's Day because she wanted to wear something, but something light and something that's not, heavy. And like she really loves wearing all different types of jewelry. So I had to make them, I had to step out of my box of huge statement pieces. But that's how it was growing. Like as a designer, things and colors. Like at one point, even in my work, I only used pastels for like 10 years. So I had to learn how to branch out of that, which was difficult because I always did a white background. I always did, soft blues, pinks, purples. So I really had to grow. And I'm really glad because I was scared at first, but then when you push yourself, you're like, I don't know if anybody will like it. Like, but then, So
but then you do, and you look back at your old stuff and you're like, oh man, what was I thinking?
Literally all pinks, all purples, all blues, like nothing else. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm glad that I'm out of that stage because sometimes I'll get in that mode. I'll be like, that would really look good in a pink. But it's like, no, you could do it in a red. It's okay.
And so the process from you getting from that stage to the stage where you are now, where you're a little bit more exploratory in your designs, was there someone who was kind of pushing you in that direction, or as an artist were you just like, it's time for me to grow?
Well, I'm thankful that I've always had artists and creatives in my family. So the family that I come from, the Goodwill family, everybody is an artist. Everybody is creative. So my uncle, my mom's brother, Wayne Goodwill, he had some pieces in Saskatchewan, and it was deciphering Sitting Bull's robe. And so he's one of the last hide painters. And so, even my aunties, my cousins, they've all taught me. I didn't learn this on my own. I didn't wake up one day and know all of this. They were kind enough to teach me and to show me, and I had questions. And growing up with, my mom always did work. My mom's a teacher, so she's a professor. But when we were younger, she would make us everything that we had. So I've been raised in the powwow circle since I was very, very young. My family is also very prominent in that circle. So I was always surrounded by that. And then just understanding the stories that came with it, and the importance of why we use the designs we do. Because when we look at our traditional designs, it tells you everything. It tells you what family you're from. It tells me what your family, finds important, colors, symbols, it tells you where you're located. So it has a lot of information into those designs. So even just understanding and learning is still a process, and so I was very thankful that my mom encouraged me, my family did. And as I got older, it went from just being something that I liked to do to more of like a meditative process. And so that's where I feel like I really, and I always made things and I've always had them available for, purchase or things like that. Cause sometimes I used to think, oh, I wonder how this would look, but I wouldn't wear it for myself because I'd be too, shy or whatever. And so it really I developed different when I became a mom as well. So I did make things for my kids, and then them traveling with me and them experiencing all these, things that were happening. And so growing from that too, I think that really helped me mature as a designer. And then just learning from other people. We always found value in our pieces. And so we always knew that they were important, but to be able to bring that to a broader audience, I think is important as well. And so that's what I really loved about evolving as an artist. And then when I was doing my social work, so I'm an RSW. And so when I was in the process of that, it's a different field. And a lot of times that process helped me to deal with a lot of things that I was learning, or, some of the tough things that were happening. Because it's a very, I went into Indigenous social work as well. So we had a lot of classes that dealt with, the history of residential school, 60s scoop. We look at, Indian day school. My children are the first generation to not be in a segregated school, so for me, when you're learning about that, it takes a toll not only as a student, but as an Indigenous person. And so using traditional art to help me get through that was what I really valued, and I'm really thankful that I did. And so I thought that, these teachings and the things that I've learned, they're not just mine. So what I wanted to do was to bring that into social work. So when I paired those two things, then it helped me create something different. And so I feel like I matured past, I went a little bit further than I think in my daringness to even try colors. So that was all of these things. So everything that I make always has, layers and layers, but that's what art is. That's what, being creative is, and sharing stories, and, so that's what I love about it, because I'm changing, even though I haven't had a lot of new pieces lately because we're homeschooling. It's really nice to take a break and do that. And so, so it fulfills so many different areas of life.
Yeah, it definitely does. And like learning from the processes and taking in things that you're going through in life, and it just changes everything just that little bit. And so that when you reflect on it, you can really learn and grow from that as well. And I think that's really, really, really interesting. And the jewelry is just like such a cool, it's so cool to me. I love the pieces that you create, and yeah.
That means a lot. Thank you. That means a lot, because, it's, you never know. Like, I don't know if something people will like anything, or, whatever. And so it's really, I'm really thankful. Thank you for saying that, because, it does mean a lot, because you feel a connection with each other. And so that's what I love, is, connecting with each other. And I appreciate it.
Absolutely. For sure. And I'm just going to pop over to the next slide here, because we have a couple more bracelets, but now some hats as well. So Tell me the story about this hat.
Oh, that is with a private collector.
Cool.
He is a director. And so I was really happy that he chose to purchase one of my hats. How I got into hats was my dad. So my dad is a cowboy. He's in his late 70s, but he's still, a cowboy. And so he would always say like, oh, can you make me this? Or can you, make me a hat band? Like he would kind of casually bring it up. So I would, that was the first hat I ever, embellished was my dad's, cowboy hat. And he would always give things away. Like people would be like, oh, I love your hat. And he'd be like, oh, here, because that's just how, being traditional, like a traditional Cree man is. And us as in general, like you're looked at for the more that you can give. So my dad always, gives people things. So, so that's how I started, getting into hats.
Yeah.
And then, I think it was like 2016, 2017, there was a big resurgence in, hats like this. So I like making flat brims. So I become well-versed on different types of hats, which materials I enjoy working with and which I don't, or which is harder, because it's really hard on your hands, especially going through the brim. And so, but I enjoy doing it because I like working on black hats, of course, because the colors pop a lot, but I also, enjoy playing with color. Like, see, I have pink in there, but there's, green and all of those different colors. And so that working on hats has made me kind of push myself out of the zone of just normal design work as well, because our designs do have a meaning. And so it's like, well, what do I want to put in it? What do I want this to say, or how do I want the energy of this hat to be? So that's when I was really into the Baileys. I'm still really into Bailey hats. They're probably the best. So if I could tell anybody, get Baileys, because they're easy to take care of. Some of them you can just like throw in the wash, and you can, and it doesn't compromise the form of the hat. And then I always say just play with hat bands. Like layer hat bands on each other. So I even now, like, I have a few hats that I have in a box. So I'm doing a hat collaboration with Hampui Hats in Berkeley.
Cool.
And so those hats that he makes are absolutely stunning. And so I'm very thankful that, we're doing a collaboration together. And so I'll be working those, in the coming few weeks, and we'll see how that works out. But I always tell people, get yourself a good hat. And you can wear it in the winter and in the summer. And but like all I say is layer your hat bands, and then don't be afraid of shapes, because I didn't think the bowler hat, I didn't think I would like to work on a bowler hat. And then I did. I was like, oh, okay, like this isn't bad. So I really like the shape of that. And locally, I believe it is in West Edmonton Mall.
Oh yeah,
Chappelle hats.
Yeah.
So I've gotten a couple of hats from there, a couple of years ago, but they have really good hats there as well. And then locally too, you can do, of course, all the cowboy hats and stuff. So
yeah, absolutely. And what challenges maybe did you face with doing a hat like this versus a cowboy hat? Or like, what are the different structures that you had to work with?
So cowboy hats are probably the hardest because they're very stiff, and they have to be. But the brim, it's just, I think it's just making sure, like, it's a long process. So you're sitting there and you're having to make sure that the brim is equal all the way around.
Mm-hmm.
And so that takes a long time. So sometimes I have to use like a 2 process. So I have to use an awl, and then I have to take pliers and like pull it through, and then count all my beads, and then, you know, stick my awl in there, and then pull it through with pliers again. So it takes, you know, a really, really long time.
Right.
But I figured that the only way I was able to see which hats I liked to work with and which I didn't was I just bought a ton of different hats.
Yeah.
So with the bowler that's shown there, that was originally going to be for the Glenbow Eye of the Needle exhibition.
Okay.
So I had a few hats prepared for that, but I just wanted a very small variety of like different hats that they could choose. Yeah. So we ended up picking, I believe, a top hat and a flat brim. And I had this one left over, but I hadn't beaded the brim yet. And so working with that hat was a lot easier, the brim was, than the cowboy hat and the top hat and the flat brim.
So I have a couple questions for you in the meantime. In terms of process, do you typically start a project and then, you know, maybe your hands are really tired, you start another project, or, you know, do you sit down and just plan everything out? Give me a sense of your process.
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. So I have like a few basics. So I know I've had to learn how to only do 3 varieties of something, right? But when I want to try something new, I usually just, it'll be in my mind and I will sketch it on my phone, but it'll be like lines.
Right.
Just to kind of give me an idea of what structurally I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And so I will usually plug at it for a while, but it will be constantly like if I really want to try something, I won't do anything else.
Yeah.
So I usually try to go with sets of pieces. So if I'm really in a hat mood, then I'll do a ton of hats.
Yeah.
Which I haven't been into for a while. So I'm due for that.
Right.
But also, you know, I wanted, because I like the heritage collection of the antique dentilium, I, you know, will see some, and I'm always looking for materials. So I saw these 24 karat gold, rose gold beads. And so I will here and there buy things. So I usually have hordes of 24 karat beads everywhere. And then I'll just feel like it one day and I'll just sit down and I'll do like 5 pairs.
Right.
And so then I'm seeing what I like and what I don't like. So I'm always tweaking whatever piece that I'm doing, but I usually just focus on one. And so I've been struggling with a new style of earring with dentilium since before COVID. So I'm still at it to see, because, you know, I want something that's not big, but not, you know, I'm trying to get it so that everybody can enjoy, you know, size-wise. Right. So that's kind of what I do. I'll do something until I feel that I love how it is, or I just need to let it go and move on. Right. But for the most part, I just think of something, concentrate on what it is that I want to make, and then just continue to do it until I'm done.
Right.
And then that way I don't have to go back to, you know, if I'm doing all dentilium at one time, that I'm fine with that and I could rest from, you know, creating dentilium pieces for 6 months. Right. And so that's kind of the process that I go through. But yeah.
Absolutely. Have you ever gone back and like restructured a piece at all, or like once you're done, you kind of like let it go?
Well, every piece too. Yeah. I've definitely created things and then just we'll see how it goes. But I've definitely learned the importance of materials and technique. So I've had to learn how to do, you know, like jewelry things. So I had to not use so many traditional materials like sinew, or, I had to put in wire, to maintain like the structural integrity of, some quill work.
Right.
So in that way, I've definitely, and I'll probably continue to, see what is easier as I get older too. My hands really, have been through it. So I don't do as much as I used to, but I definitely still do, things every night or every, little while that I get some time. But no, but I've definitely gotten easier and being more open to learning. So learning new techniques or asking other jewelers like what they think would look good, or, so I'm more open to not being scared to ask, because before I'd be too scared. I'd be like, oh, I'll just figure it out. And, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And how are you finding it working with other artisans and collaborating on projects?
Oh my. Well, I think that as artists, it's important because we all have a story. We all represent different, tribes and communities. When I started collaborating, it was usually with not so much like design pieces, but just like larger, like bags and things like that. But then when I started to really collaborate was probably when I joined the collective. So I was one of the first artists to be asked to be a part of the collective. So what would happen was we would get, the release of whatever it is Bethany was creating, and we would just create pieces to accompany that. And so in that way, it helped me to see things differently than what I've done before, and see what worked and see what didn't work. It was such a learning, curve at the beginning, because there wasn't a lot of, designers and artisans that were coming. Like we have, but it's not as much as like in the US. So I think that's where I really flourished, and I'm thankful for that. And so only in the past few years have I collaborated with other Canadians, which is really good as well. But it's such a different scope of it, and I'm so glad that I can contribute something or can learn something from the artists or the designers that are creating pieces. Because it's a relationship, and so it's managing expectations.
Yeah, I feel like there's more of like an overarching goal as a team that's collaborating on something, rather than just being an individual artist being, this is what I want to try, this is what I want to do, but having that like very singular vision, and like you want this outcome for everybody. I think that's really interesting and definitely something useful as an artist, so that when you go back to working singularly, you're like, oh, I feel so much more confident going into this area or this area. Yeah.
Well, yeah. And the thing is too, is like, because I was on my own for so long, and I'm a mom, and I was in school, and I was working, and I was, doing my practicum, all of these things. For me, it was easier to focus on the creative part because I wasn't having to take the photos. I wasn't having to, market it, that I could just create a piece and it fit very well, and then to hand it to somebody who was more experienced than I was. And so that's what I really enjoyed about it, because and I had more time to continue, finish school and then continue to work and travel and do all of these like other things that I probably wouldn't have had even the money to do.
Right.
And then I wouldn't have gotten into, had the opportunities to be featured in the Met or to have my pieces at the Oscars, and I was successful as an artist on my I'm a designer on my own, but, it was so helpful for me to be asked. I'm always so thankful when somebody asks, but also to have a group of people that the goal in the end is to showcase each other's, tribes and the pieces that we find important to our tribes, and have that accessibility to everybody, especially to non-native communities and non-native collectors, because then they know they're getting an authentic piece.
Yeah.
And then it's going back into the, you know, artist and back into the community. So, you know, it's a blessing to do collaborations.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do have one more slide here with my favorite hat.
That is my favorite hat too. That was a very collaborative effort. I'm so blessed. So I had created a piece. Usually I don't take orders or commissions really. And so I had a couple pieces of dentilium work. And when somebody is interested in buying, you know, a piece, I'm always, you know, I'm like, oh, great. Like, thank you so much. And I usually write them a note and, you know, just tell them how much, you know, their support means to me. So I didn't know that the woman who had bought one of my pieces, it was for her wedding. And so I was like, oh my gosh, like that's something that's so amazing. And I'm very thankful to be part of, you know, her day. So she wanted a hat. And so I usually have a few hats in storage. And so I just kind of I was like, yeah, for sure, of course. So I brought some hats. She really liked that one. That was a flat brim. And so she really just talked about what type of piece she wanted, what colors. And then so I was like, okay. And then she was like, hey, yeah, and you can just ship it. And I was like, okay. So I didn't know, she didn't see it. I had a couple of photos, but you know, she was like, well, we'll just, you know, see when it gets here. And that was the hat. And so I was so happy that she loved it. And, you know, so yeah, it's one of my favorites. Because I have a special connection with each piece.
Yeah.
And it's a piece of me, you know, like, so it's like, I love it. And I love, yeah, but for sure, that's one of my favorite. And it's a flat brim, so you can't go wrong.
It must be so difficult to make a piece that you are like, oh, this is so me. Like, this is like, I created this for me almost, and watch it go. So my question for you is,
okay, that's when I know. Yeah.
And then been like, I'm just going to keep this for me.
Okay, every single time, if I'm like, oh my gosh, I love that. Oh my gosh. And then I have to send it away. I'm like, okay, then that's the result of like my creative process for that piece. If I don't want it and if I don't want to wear it, because sometimes too, like I have really sensitive ears. So I can't, like, I don't really wear a lot of jewelry, right? So when I'm like, oh, like I love that, but I know, you know, I won't be able to wear it. Like even my daughter she doesn't have her ears pierced, so I had to, you know, we had to make clip-ons for her. But so yeah, if it's something that I really really love, I just send it off. But I do get really nervous when they're in the post.
Yeah.
Like I'm always like, oh, please make it safely. You know, please like get to you safely, because it's a piece of me. And I'm always like, thank you. Like this past month, I think the farthest that one of my pieces went was to Hawaii. And so the set of earrings, I'm like, you guys have an amazing time, you know, your new life in Hawaii. Yeah. So, you know, that's how it is. Because, yeah, it's like the spirit of like, you know, this little collaboration that I have with these, you know, natural materials. So, yeah, absolutely. It's always really nice.
Yeah. And you're taking it from something that's so natural and so raw and embellishing it in such beautiful ways that once it's finished, it's like its own little like being.
It honestly is. And that's like one of the teachings that we have too, is that everything we create like has that spirit, and you're putting that spirit into what you're making. And so using, you know, this process to help me, you know, even through challenging times, you know, I'll be so happy that I'm asked, you know, to make something special. But even if it's like a not so good feeling that I have, that's a part that I'm working through as well. And that's what the art and that process helps me with. So in that way, it is that healing part, even if I'm like, you know, upset or a little bit emotional, or maybe I'm, you know, tired and exhausted.
Yeah.
That spirit of resilience goes into that piece. And so that's what I love about that process, because it's helping me. It's like helping me sort out, you know, who I am, or celebrate things, or, you know. So.
Yeah, that's such a good point, Alaynee. Like when you're going through life and as an artist, you're faced with, you know, I have to get this goal, or I have to finish this project or whatever. And it's hard to cross that line and step into, okay, I'm being an artist now and I have to focus on this, when really you had a really long day, or, you know, all of this stuff, and you don't really want to create at that moment, but then pushing through and then finding that happiness in the end, or finishing that project and it feels so much better, and that healing that comes through that process was really
yeah.
And so
but I'm so thankful that, like, I haven't chatted about my work in a really long time. So
yeah. Do you ever create like more so like paintings or any type of like sculptures or anything like that, or do you specifically work in jewelry now?
So I have so I make traditional dolls, which are really important in our culture. And they're also used as a teaching tool in our coming of age ceremonies. So I used to do a lot of that, but I don't do it anymore. And so what I also started to do, I don't do any sculptures, but I do small framed pieces. So that's something that I'm trying to kind of convert everything. I have done it in the past, like I've done a lot of framed pieces, but I want to kind of, because like not everybody wants jewelry, or not everybody, you know, so I'm trying to make that more accessible as well. But I am starting to really get interested in lino cut. And so I've kind of been dabbling in that for the past little while, to just kind of see where, you know, it's just something that I thought was always amazing. And especially working at the gallery, because I see so many different, and I don't, when I first started working there, like I didn't have a lot of knowledge in contemporary art. And so with learning that through, you know, being there and understanding the history, that has encouraged me to kind of branch out in that way. And what can I bring to, you know, another medium? And so although I don't do exclusively, you know, painting or, you know, sculpting, it's something else that I would like to kind of continue to see if I like it or not, or
we'll explore it and bring your own artist's eye to that type of medium.
Exactly. And like, even with being an urban Aboriginal person too, so the type of traditional pieces that I do, it's really land-based. So, you know, being in a city, you can't, you know, dye porcupine quills in the yard. Like all of these things that you would traditionally be able to do, you can't do here. So I thought it was really interesting to see, well, what does my environment have, you know, to dye quills with? You know, what can I forage around here that would do something like that? So even that part is very, like I've been thinking about that a lot too. So how can I dye porcupine quills with something that is in, you know, like outside?
Right.
And is that workable? Is that, you know, so so I'm exploring those things too, which I think is really interesting. And especially now with homeschool, with my son. So we're just trying to see how, you know, to navigate it as well as everybody else. So
Absolutely. I think I just have one or two more questions for you, and then we'll wrap up. So if anybody in the chat wants to send over a question for Alaynee, please do so now. So my question for you is, when you're creating a new piece or a new project, do you have a specific outcome of what you want to create, or does it typically create itself as you continue working on it?
I think I always have a specific image or texture or feeling or emotion that I have, but it never turns out how I think that it will. And so, yeah, it's usually like very like, okay. And then I'll put it away and like go to bed. And then, yeah. So it usually I usually start out with like this in my head, but very rarely does it ever, you know, turn out exactly.
Yeah, because you mentioned having like a structure and having like, okay, I know the process and I know the technique of what to do. But that like overall feeling at the end, once you've finished it and you're like, oh, this isn't really what I intended to make, but I made it.
I'm like, here it is. And then that's how you see like a bunch of new work that I have. And I'll be like, oh, it doesn't look too bad. And like, yeah. So it was like even like using traditional materials and like bringing, you know, using that material, but using, you know, very contemporary medium is something that's like interesting too. But that's how it is. Like even with our Paraflash painting series, and then even for National Aboriginal Day, that's the point. You want to connect with people and say that, you know, like we all have those things, but this is the medium that we choose to, you know, present it in. So that's what I love about, you know, doing what I do when I can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. In between doing all of the things that you do.
Yeah.
Especially in COVID land that we're in right now.
Yes, exactly. And it's, yeah, it's very, I'm really glad that we have the technology to connect. Because yeah, like it could be very, very lonely unless you're an introvert, then you're.
I know, I'm loving this.
Yeah. But yeah, but most of my family, like we're half here and we're half in the US. So, you know, even that is, I'm thankful for the family that I have here. And then also I miss the family that, you know, I can't see normally. But yeah, it's so different. But, you know, I'm glad that we have technology to connect us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like this opportunity tonight, it's so wonderful to actually have a conversation with someone where I can see their entire face. And especially learning. And learning about your craft and your technique. And it's just so wonderful to get to know you, because I've seen your product in the shop so much. And every time I walk by, I'm like, oh, that's a cute pair of earrings. That's a cute pair of earrings. And I'm just like, I'm always wanting to buy them. But now that I know more about your practice, it's so encouraging. And I'm so excited for our Bring It Home event this December and January, where we'll be showcasing your pieces as well. And thank you again.
I'm really excited.
Yeah, I'm super excited.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, for sure. This is one of the best parts of my job, for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Totally. And it makes it like
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you too. Thank you. Oh no, I was saying thank you for having me. It was really, it's nice to like kind of take a break and talk about something that's not homeschool related. But yeah, thank you so much.
Absolutely. And thank you all so much for joining us this evening. If you have any questions about Alaynee's work that we have at the Shop AGA, feel free to shoot us over an email or check out the website, and we would be happy to help. Thanks, everyone. Good night.